And hello, everybody. It's Trish Carr with Women's Prosperity Network for another episode of Sister to Sister. It's conversations with my sisters, my friends of color, really getting down and dirty with what's it like to be a person of color in America. And I'm really excited about my guest today because she is an amazing woman. She is the best-selling author of the children's book, Karson Goes to School, and of the Karson Books series. She's a speaker, a business leader, and most important, a mother. And let me show you, I have to show you this picture because she's so adorable. When we were talking before we got together, look at this picture. You can see that right on the left. You'll see a picture of Roshel. How old were you then?
Oh man, maybe about 4.
Yeah, 4 years old in St.
Yeah.
Louis, Missouri. Could you tell that's
St.
St. Louis?
Louis,
Right.
314.
Beautiful, very cute picture. Adorable, adorable, adorable. So Rachelle Merryweather is a woman who grew up in Memphis. You just saw a great little picture of her, and moved to St. Louis later on. And now she lives just outside Dallas. She left home at 17 and was the first in her family to graduate from college. And I love this. She never knew a no that she listened to.
That's right.
You
That
go,
is
woman. You go, woman. So it's so
absolutely.
great to have you with me, Rochelle. Thanks so much for being here today.
Well, thank you, Trish. Thank you for the warm and gracious welcome. And thank you, Sister to Sister family, for being here. Please like and share. We definitely, this is something that's tremendous that Trish is doing, is spreading the word about what's going on, what's been going on in the country with discrimination. And, hopefully this will help us create solutions. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And, when I first started the show, I said this when we first got started before I set the recording. I've been an activist my whole life. I've always been involved in civil rights, human rights, women's rights. And, last year, when yeah, after, I mean, it happened over and over and over again. And George Floyd was the catalyst for Black Lives Matter actually taking to the streets. And I felt like there was something I had to do to have conversation around this because, we've got to talk to each other to understand. And that's it. I always want to seek to understand.
Absolutely.
So what better way to do that than talking to people who've experienced racism? And
Absolutely.
it's true, right? And I would get into, we've all had Facebook conversations and arguments, right? So when
Mhm.
it first happened, I would write things about white privilege and systemic racism, and actually people would push back. There's no
Oh,
such thing. What are you talking about? I work 3 jobs and I'm white. I'm like, nobody ever said you didn't work hard. I'm just saying that your skin color didn't add to it.
that's
So
right.
that's how I decided to do this. Was I was like, you can argue all about concepts, the concept of white privilege, the concept of discrimination, the concept of systemic racism, but you can't argue with people's experiences. And when you and I were talking, there were a couple things that came up
Mhm.
around your experience. So where do you want to start?
Okay. Actually, I'll start at the very, very beginning because my mother, I actually grew up, I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. And my mother is a darker skinned African American, lovely woman, beautiful. And before I was even born, my mother made the decision to have me with a lighter skinned man so that I didn't have to actually, in her mind, go through some of the challenges that she had uh, gone through growing up. So that's actually, race was a consideration from my conception,
So I was
and
looking for a tall man and she was looking for a light skinned man.
correct.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
part of her criteria. Has to have a good sense of humor, has to have a job, light skin required.
That is
right?
right.
Wow, that's an interesting decision that she made based on her own experience as a darker African American woman. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. It comes on both sides, in the Black community, and it's not talked about often how, there are, they used to have the sack, the brown paper sack challenge, in colleges, or, who would date who. You had people from the Black community even that, wouldn't necessarily date someone that was darker than a paper sack. So in this country, we have deep rooted issues, really on a lot, in a lot of different areas. But yeah, from my conception, um, today I did want to talk about being bused to school.
mhm,
That was something that went on in St. Louis, and it was called the DSEG program, or the desegregation program. And what that was the thought behind it was to create opportunities for inner city youth with promise, um, because of the failed educational system within the city, you
right.
know. And so we would have to wake up early in the morning, a lot of days at 5 a.m. or so, and get ready to get on buses, by 6 a.m. or so,
And
to
you're
get
how
out to
old
the.
now? You're like 10?
I was in middle school when I did it, but they started all the way in elementary school. But I
Mhm.
began the program in middle school.
Okay. So that's probably like 11, 12.
Absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm. So every morning you'd have to get on the bus at 6 a.m.
Hmm.
What time did you get home from school after you got dropped off? Like how
Um,
long was your day?
yeah, I would say about four something
Wow.
in the afternoon. Yeah, it's an all day, journey for sure.
Wow. So what was that experience like? I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn and
Okay.
there was busing, but not in my neighborhood. It wasn't anything that I experienced. I've heard stories, I've heard, you know, about all the things that happened or didn't happen. Like some neighborhoods, it was great. Some neighborhoods, it was rioting at times just to get started. But what
Mhm.
was it like for you?
Well, in my family, it was talked of as an opportunity, you know. And so I was actually excited about joining the program, and the kids that participated actually became really close. We the time that we had to spend and share on the bus, um,
Right.
that was great. What I noticed is, to me, in some ways, kind of a lack of community. Um, I had my 20-year reunion. I'm dating myself a little bit here, but I had my 20-year reunion about 5 years ago now. And it was okay. I mean, one of the things is that I left home at 17.
Right.
So, I didn't maintain a lot of relationships. So it didn't feel as close as I've experienced with some of my friends that they've had going back to their class reunions. Because for one thing, I didn't grow up in the same neighborhood with the kids that I went to school with. So
Yes.
it's a different experience later on in life to come back, and you already didn't grow up in the neighborhood, and then to bridge the gap and have these relationships. So it was a little weird.
Yeah, I'm sure that was weird. What was it? How integrated was the school? Like, what was the percentage of black to white? Do you know? Or can you give it a
Oh man,
ballpark?
it was probably 92 to 95%
White.
white, and the minorities made up the rest in between us.
So what was
um
that like as a 12, 11, 12, 13-year-old girl to
yeah,
be one of a small number of a minority in a white school?
yeah, and also a wealthy school district at that.
Ah, okay.
So I mean, in some ways you could feel somewhat inferior because you're looking at their clothes. They're driving, you know BMWs and, you know, Camaros and different things to school, and you're getting, you know, on and off the bus.
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, it kind of starts you looking inward and feeling less than in certain ways.
Yeah. I mean, the economic disparity is in your face every single day.
Every single
Probably
day.
in the clothes you everyone wore as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Clothes. You know, if they went off campus to eat, you know, we were pretty much, you know, stuck on campus to eat. And, you know, they would go McDonald's or wherever they would go. They
Right.
had the ability to go because they had a car. So you
Yeah.
automatically in some ways fell to a different class, you know.
Yeah. What was the interaction with the other kids? Because, you know, like tends to attract like.
Mm-hmm.
People who are the same tend to be gathered together. It's true
Mm-hmm.
across all races, all religions. What was
Right.
your experience of that in school?
Yeah, I mean, it was not I'm not going to say it was horrible.
Good.
There were definitely relationships that were built. I took German actually from um, sixth grade on till the time I graduated. So that particular class, we really, you know, were close knit and really bonded. And to this day, there are relationships that are still from, you know, just going through those classes. So, you know, I wouldn't say that I just directly felt like I couldn't form friendships or like it wasn't open.
All
You
right,
know, I
that's
was also
great.
on a palm squad for a while. So,
Oh, I
you know,
can see you now with the palms. That's great.
absolutely. Let's go.
Let's go. I'm
Yes,
going to ask you to do a cheer for us.
let's go.
That's really great. What would you
Mhm.
say was the best part of the experience, and what was the most challenging of the experience?
Well, actually, the educational opportunity itself, it really was an opportunity. It allowed for me to see that there is another side of life, you know, and everyone isn't necessarily struggling. Um, you know, it's another side to life. And so yeah, we were challenged more academically. There were greater opportunities such as, you know, we could play tennis or, you know, golf team and cross country, things of that nature that we may not have been exposed to with our neighborhood school.
Yeah,
So
because your school had way more funding than your neighborhood schools. That's the reality
yeah,
of
which
it,
is sad. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
sad, which is still the case
Yeah.
today. You went to your
Mhm.
20-year reunion. Here we are 20 years later, and those schools in the higher economic area as opposed to the lower, it's unbelievable disparity. So
Yeah. And
you
in
were,
St.
that
Louis,
is, it's nice you
oh,
see that as an opportunity. I'm sorry, what
mhm.
else did you say?
I was saying in St. Louis, especially, they're closing so many of the inner city schools. And I believe at one point, the government may have actually seized control of the school and the fund, you know, because I mean, it's really a problem there.
And
Mhm.
that's an example to me of systemic racism.
Absolutely.
You can't say
Absolutely.
it doesn't exist when one school district has no extracurricular activities like tennis and golf and the things you just mentioned, and the other school is trying to get computers or books. Yeah,
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 absolutely.
yeah. So you certainly lived it, and it's great that you see it as an opportunity for you. On the other side of it, what would you say was the disadvantage, or if there are any, or the
Right.
challenges that you found in it?
Um, as I was stating earlier, I believe the huge economic disparities that, I mean, it was just inevitable. I mean, there was no way that we couldn't see it, but if there would have been a little bit more settling of that issue, I don't know how you settle that or how you correct that, because the opportunities just, they just weren't this, you know, our opportunities weren't necessarily the same. Some people will say that they they are or they should have been. But when you're living it, um, you can see a difference, you know.
Do you have brothers and sisters? Did
I
they
do. I have
also,
one young
one younger,
sister.
and did she also get bused to another school?
Yes, she did.
What was her experience, if any, different than yours?
Yeah. Well, in a way, I think that she integrated a little bit more with the students that went through school with her. They had a she was a little bit more of a party person, so she would find ways to go off of campus with them and create friendships that way. I was just a little bit more disciplined in my studies.
Awesome. Is your experience part of the reason you wrote Karson Goes to School?
In certain ways, actually, it comes from his experience. Karson Goes to School is based on my child with ADHD. And I've been fortunate enough to actually now live in a community that I was bused to, a similar community to what I was bused to. I actually live in the community. And he is an African American boy, and the academics are superior, they're wonderful, the opportunities where we live. However, I did notice earlier on what appeared to be discrimination towards him as far as the school to prison pipeline. Some of those challenges I had when he was in like the first grade, and I had to address them with the principal at the school.
What kinds of things? When you talk about the school to prison pipeline, just expand on that a little so
Okay.
people will
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. So, it's statistically been proven that African American children are normally disciplined at a higher rate than their, white counterparts. And what I noticed at my son's school was that I was getting almost, they have what's called the school dojo, and it's an app, and teachers communicate with parents using this app. And he had his first grade teacher that I would constantly get notifications. At one point, school started at 7:50 in the morning. I received a notification at 7:52 in the morning. That's just how often I was getting these notifications. And I said to her, I said, has my son even had a chance to take his coat off? You know, school just started at 7:50. How am I getting this at 7:52? And so I did have to go to the principal's office and discuss these matters, because up until that point, my son had been getting, you know, good reports from school.
Mhm, mhm.
And it had, he was a joy to be around. You know, was the discussion that I had with his teachers up to that point. And my son started school, he went to private preschool at 3 years old. So um, getting this feedback from this teacher, I'm just wondering. And so I started speaking to some other parents, and they were like, "Yeah, I get a lot of feedback from her, and we like these kids. They went to school from kindergarten up, together, and
Right.
they were saying that they hadn't experienced anything like it. And just talking amongst the parents, it just seemed to be a pattern that something just wasn't necessarily on the up and up with this particular teacher. So,
So you
yeah.
saw a pattern of the Black kids being called out,
Yes.
and it's not because they're more mischievous. It's simply, it can't possibly be. I mean, fingers will point and say, well, they deserved it and they were doing it, but
Mhm.
I just know from my own reality that that's not true. And that's a bigotry that's so ingrained because of socialization as white. That's really what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think so. And my concern was like, that I spoke with the principal. I'm like, look, I'm young and I'm raising a young African American male.
Yes.
I am my son, I'm not setting him up for failure. We're going to work through this. We're going to come up with a solution, because you're not going to ruin his record and have him on a behavior plan in the first grade.
Yes.
And I was just matter of fact about it.
Good for you.
And we were
Stand it up
able
for
to.
your kid.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all. That's interesting. That's another thing a white parent would never think about.
Right.
Why would my kid be targeted or pointed at or any of those things? Yeah. Really interesting. And then the other thing that you mentioned to me was when you were older and you were going to buy your first house, you ran into an issue that was apparently rooted in racism somehow.
Mhm.
So what was that?
Yeah, so I at this point I was a single parent, and I went to purchase my first home. Um, I made newbie mistakes, but what I had done up to that point, I actually had almost an 800 credit score when I went to purchase this house.
Whew, can I
So,
touch you? That's like a good credit score. That's great.
oh yeah, and I was 25, and I built my
Wow.
home from the ground up, as they say. So
Nice.
it was a proud moment for me. But what I come to realize years later was that um, I was taken advantage of. I was set into a rate mortgage,
Mm.
and so what happened was, of course, my rate continued to excel and go up and up and up, to where I was forced to sell my home, because I couldn't afford the payments, and that was a short sale, so that went on my credit, and it impacted me for some years, where my neighbors, and some of them, may have had questionable or less favorable credit than I had, were put into fixed rate, 30-year mortgages.
Yeah.
I was actually part of a lawsuit and did recoup some of my money behind it. But yes, that was actually, proven to have happened to me.
And your principal, the amount you owed on your house went up. Like, that's what happened in those days. I worked Nancy Matthews, my sister, had a title company then, and we did real estate closings.
Right.
And I have to say that I saw a lot of those. And I have to think, as as you point this out, and I think back, I think there were a larger number of those to African Americans now that you're talking about it. And it just came to me now. I just saw it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know everybody was taken advantage of back then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I'm
And
not
I'll
just
bet you if
singling.
we looked at it, there's probably a higher stat for African Americans. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I get that too. I get that
Yeah.
too. And the whole, real estate,
That
for
is
years,
another area.
yeah,
Yes.
real estate for years, with redlining and pushing people out of their homes. That's a whole nother conversation. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for sharing your story, Rochelle, and Carson's story too. Because the more we can learn from each other, the better we are. In fact, there's a website called, it's 1milliontruths.com, all spelled out, 1milliontruths.com. And I saw it on TV with the actor who is on This Is Us. I can't bring his name to my head right now. And it is meant to be a testimony by people of color of what they've experienced. So I really urge people to just go there and look at the testimonies, look at what has happened to people, what they've experienced, and just put yourself in their shoes. That's it. That's all we have to do to get to open up each other and really come from our hearts rather than from our experiences as socialized white people. Because, I grew up in a white neighborhood, and yes, I grew up in Brooklyn. So where I went to school, we were integrated. Uh, Puerto Ricans, actually, I think we had more Puerto Ricans than African Americans where I went to school. But even so, I would go home to my white neighborhood, like you said. There was no socialization beyond going to school together. So the more we can come together and share our experiences, the more we learn from each other. As we close out, Rochelle, is there anything you'd like to leave with our listeners today? Anything, suggestions, anything you'd like to say?
Yes, absolutely. Just piggybacking on what you said, before you judge a person, try to take a step back and sit for a moment and think about, it's something like my grandmother used to say, does it add value? Is it kind? And just try to think about it from another point of view. And I think we would all be in a better place if we would do that. Yes.
Yes. Does it add value? Is it kind? Thank you, Rachelle Merryweather, for everything you do. Thank you for writing a book with a young African American boy. The more children's books we have with children of color, the more that people can see and acknowledge that we all want the same things. We want to be valued, we want to be heard, we want to be loved. That's it. So thank you so much for being with me. And thank you, everybody, for being with us this morning. As usual, you can always get a copy of this podcast on YouTube, on the Women's Prosperity Network channel, or you can go to womensprosperityNetwork.com and just click on the menu that says more, and you'll find all of our recordings with all of my fabulous sisters and hearing their experiences. Thank you, everybody. Again, that's 1milliontruths.com. Check it out. Trish Carr signing off. See you again next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.